I think all Ollie's going to show us is her tail in this video. She's laying down over here on a very hot Friday afternoon on the screen porch here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video where I answer gardening questions that were asked in the previous week's video. You can ask questions down below this video, but it'll be a couple weeks before there's another garden question and answer video, because next week is Subscriber Sunday, where subscribers send in photos of things in their landscapes or gardens that they're proud of. So here is the email address to send in photos for Subscriber Sunday. I've done this video for several years now, but I have taken breaks. I took a long break, actually, for probably about a year last year. But I'm trying to get back to doing these because I enjoy seeing photos from your gardens. Couple things. Try to just take one great photo and attach it to the email and send it, and turn your phones sideways. If you're taking photo with your phone, YouTube is a widescreen format, so the photos need to be this, this direction, widescreen. If they're taken straight up and down, then you get the black bars on the side and people don't really get to see the full effect of your garden. You have all week to send a photo. So, early morning or evening tends to be the better time to take the photos. The sunlight is not as harsh as it is during the middle of the day. So take your time, take a great photo of something during the week, and please send it in. I love seeing you guys' photos, and I'll put that video together for next weekend. Let's see. I had mentioned I do landscape consultations in last week's video, and lots of you signed up for a consultation, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. I think there's a lot of open spots, I think the last weekend in August before I'm back on the road some, if you're interested in that. And I've just done a ton of traveling. I have been in 11 states in 2 weeks, and more to come. Flying out to Orlando to a garden center meeting in the next few days. I'm in Kansas City, Mobile. I don't know how many states will end up being before the end of the year, but lots, and hopefully some good content coming from that. Hopefully you guys will think so. So let's get to some questions from last week's video. Somebody was talking about toxic compost. I have mentioned recently that about toxic compost, about herbicides that linger even through the composting process. So, things are being sprayed with particular herbicides that outlast, again, the composting process. Your plants can be stunted from it. They can have irregular growth, weird leaves, just flat out die, just sit and linger and do basically nothing. All kinds of variations of this, depending on how much of the herbicide is present still in the compost. Somebody was just asking, they felt like they had been a victim of it, and they've had some things die, some things languish, weird growth in the things that they use this particular compost on, and wanted to know what I would do. I'd probably try to dig some of it out if you can. This can last a couple years, or just not plant anything back into that space for some period of time. But I hate that happened to you, and I'm going to try to compost more and more on this property now that everything is of size. I talked about this last year, about hopefully having enough material that I could start just making all my own compost and all my own mulch and everything from the debris and the leaves and everything that falls onto this landscape. And I just wasn't there yet. But things now are growing so fast and so big so quickly that I'm going to start using my chipper and making my own organic materials here, and that way I don't have to worry about that as much. Let's see. I talked about protecting plants from the sunlight last week, and I didn't follow up on how I go about using a shade cloth or whatever, but a lot of people make great suggestions down below that video. I mentioned this last week too about, as you're watching this video every week, if you're watching it in the middle of the week, there's probably been a lot of comments and a lot of questions that have been asked. You can go down and see people's suggestions. A lot of people make great suggestions on things that they use to shade either their vegetable plants or their flowering plants, things that are under stress in these 100+ degree days that a lot of you are experiencing. So always great information down at the bottom of the videos, unless somebody's recommending you put down some sort of nutrient without a soil test, like I mentioned it also in last week's. But overall, a lot of people make a lot of great suggestions. I'm sitting here reading a question, and I've got in my mind how I'm going to answer that question. But there's probably the beauty, you know, a lot of gardening. You'll learn a lot of different ways to do things, a lot of different uses for things. I won't say all those things in just answering a question, but it might trigger something for somebody else to make another suggestion down at the bottom, and I appreciate that. Somebody asked if the deer sprays, the repellents for deer, will hurt pollinators. You know, the only one I use the mint liquid fence product, and so it's made from something in the mint family, either spearmint, peppermint, something like that. And I did that video on Lamiaceae, which is the mint family, a few weeks back. If you want to go back and take a look at that, most of the plants in that plant family are deer resistant because the foliage is super pungent, including mint, obviously, of the mint family. And so I use those mint-based sprays. All of those plants in the mint family are great for pollinators. So, you know, all your bees and little wasp and flies and butterflies and all the things you would want to have attracted to your garden, all those plants in the Lamiaceae are great for them. So I'm assuming the scent of mint in the garden that we're using to repel the deer are not going to repel or harm those beneficials that are actually drawn to those plants anyway. Hope I'm not wrong about that, but that's just some sort of logical guess I'm making. Let's see. Somebody asked about wood chips to avoid. So if you go to the Chip Drop website, you can put your name in there and try to get free wood chips, arborist chips. Some people call them wood chips, whatever you want to call them. But you can get them for free. Typically, you know, a lot of times it's going to just be somebody cutting down a tree and chipping it in your neighborhood. You can just drive right up to them and go, "What are you going to do with those?" They'd be more than happy to come 2 blocks to your house and dump them there, rather than driving them, you know, with the gas prices too, driving them way across the city somewhere to dump them. So, but they were asking what wood chips would I avoid, like what trees would I avoid, and I think everybody's going to scream black walnut, and that's true. Jugalone is the chemical compound that black walnuts and several other trees as well can produce to inhibit the growth of other things around the base of the tree. It's like a evolutionary trick to prevent competition around them that's quite successful. It has more impact on some plants than others. Like there's tomatoes, and I know things in the Solanaceae are really, really quite stunted by it, and other plants that are, you know, don't really even notice it. So it's plant to plant on whether it has any negative impact anyway. But just letting you know, I saw an Iowa State study and somewhere else as well that if you just let those things compost for a while, it goes away. It's the same as the pH becoming more neutral. If you're using wood chips with a very low pH like pine, by the time it goes through the composting process, the pH is near neutral. So you don't have to worry about it as long as you're letting them compost for a while. If you bring the just straight wood chips, black walnut wood chips home and put them around your plants, you could see a negative impact. But I would just let them compost. What I'll do with something like that was I would create all my paths out of it, all of my interconnected paths, let them break down in the paths, and then use that material as my compost and then redo the paths. So that's a suggestion on how to use it while you wait for it to compost. Let's see. Somebody asked about, they've got some container plants and they need to get them in the ground. Would you do it now or wait until the fall to do it? So you've got some marginal shrubs that wouldn't make it through the winter, and I got another question coming up like that. So you need to get them in the ground sooner than later. Would you do it now or wait a little longer just because of the heat? It totally depends on what it would be for me. If it was conifers, if it was super cold hardy things, I would wait until the fall. If it was marginal things I was trying to put in the ground to make sure that they made it through the first winter, I want to get some roots under those things. So if I had a Fatsia and it's zone 8 hardy and I'm in zone 7B, I'm probably going to get that Fatsia in the ground sooner than later just to get some roots under it. But if I had a juniper in a container that's zone 5 hardy and I'm in zone 7B, I would just wait until fall, because it's going to be obviously a little more stressful putting it in the ground in the heat of summer. So I'm just going to play that by how hardy the things are in the containers. If they're very hardy things that don't really need to get established before their first winter, put them in the ground in the fall. But to save something, put it in the ground sooner than later. Somebody asked me about my a shovel for clay. I use that narrow trenching shovel. It's been in, I don't know, 600 videos on this channel. It does a great job of cutting through the clay. If you have roots and clay, you can use one of those root slayer shovels. I'll link one of each down below this video, and you can look at them. I think the trenching shovel, unless you have roots, again, that root slayer shovel is a fantastic shovel for cutting through roots and cutting through difficult to dig in situations. But at a minimum, I would have just a narrower shovel. Everybody, this big, wide, 10-inch wide shovel is very difficult to put in the ground, even for grown men. That full, strong, men that are younger than I am. And when I was younger than I am now, landscaping, I still used a little narrow trenching shovel because I could just sink it into the ground. For the most part, it offers less resistance because it's narrower. The wider it is like that, the harder it is to push it into the ground. But trenching shovel or the root slayer shovel, again, I'll link them down below. Somebody asked me how hard lantana seed is to collect. It's actually very easy to collect. It's a little blackberries fruit will form where the flowers were in the late summer, and you can just collect those, and you break those open, you get the seed out. You can actually wash them or clean them and then store them, dry them off, and then store them for the winter, and they come up readily in the spring. What I will tell you, though, is frequently seeded lantana will not come up true to seed. And so if you've got a fancy one that you really, really like, it's not all that likely that the seeded ones are going to be the same. So if you want clones of what you already have, I would do rooted cuttings. And you could root them easily right now. Lantana is one of the easiest things in the world to root. So if you want the exact one you have, do rooted cuttings, get them rooted, protect them through the winter, plant them in the spring would probably be, maybe you still have time to plant them. It depends on how far south you are. But a newly planted lantana in the fall here probably wouldn't make it through the winter. They need to be pretty well established for the first winter they're in the ground. So again, I would do them from rooted cuttings, so then I know I got a clone of what I have. But seed is fun to collect, and probably would be interesting to see, what the seedlings look like. There you go. Let's see. Somebody has some heat-stressed plants that were planted in the spring. Clethra was mentioned, and wanted to know whether to go ahead and move them or not. I think they said they had 2 of them planted. One of them was in slightly more shade and was doing better. Wanted to move the other one, and would I do it now? If fall is probably the best time after they've lost some leaves. I doubt you're going to get any additional damage beyond what you've probably already taken on it at this point. So being probably dormant in the winter or in the fall would be the best time to move it, to not double down on the stress. I'll also tell you that my Clethra are in the full sun pretty much all day long in the front garden out there, and they're fine. Last year when they first went in, they did take a little bit of a burn and adjustment period. So that one that's in the sun may actually do okay next year. If it hasn't continued to decline, it may be okay just to leave it where it is and see what it does next summer in that spot. It probably will do fine, and it's probably just an event related as much to it being newly planted. Maybe got underwatered for a week or so, and that allowed that leaf to dry out enough to get burned more easily. So that's a possibility. Or it came out of some shade and went into that and was planted into that sunny spot. Sometimes we can see burn from that. Okay, somebody asked me, their Carex got chewed down, wanted to know what it was. It's 100% rabbits, for sure. Carex, especially the first year it's in the ground, most Carex are vulnerable to rabbits. They just love the things. And I think because most of the Carex kind of grows like this, they can sit right under it, I think, and eat them down. I had my Everillos were eaten pretty badly last year. They have not touched them this year, and I have lots of rabbits out here. So I think you'll see they really, really like the super juvenile foliage on a newly planted one. So I think you'll see less damage on it next year, but it's rabbits for sure. Somebody asked if they're Frostproof Gardenia. I'm sweating like crazy, just sitting here on the porch with a fan going. They're Frostproof Gardenia. They're in zone 7 in Charlotte. Wanted to know if it will survive the winter outside. If we have if we got normal winter temperatures, you know, some night that was in the teens, which would be a normal winter for us in 7B, Raleigh or Charlotte, that pot would freeze solid for some period of time, and your Frostproof Gardenia would definitely not be happy. We didn't have to crazy protect the Frostproof Gardenias at the nursery in the containers. We put them pot to pot and then put a shade cloth over the top of them. If it was going to be really, really cold, I'd put an extra cloth on top of them. So they weren't far away from being winter hardy in a container above the ground, but enough so that, you know, if you have a single pot sitting out there, yeah, it's probably not going to be winter hardy. I'd get it in the ground now or sometime in the early fall, or if it's a container that you can just bring in the garage, there's probably only about 4 nights all winter long that are going to hurt it, and that's going to be nights that are below, you know, 25. Any night that's going to be below 25, I'd roll it in the garage, and the other nights would be outside. How many of those nights are we going to get in the winter in Charlotte or Raleigh? You know, 10? Not many. So a small amount of protection or get it in the ground. But out on its own, that's really risky. Let's see. Somebody asked me when planting a tree, is it best to cut the roots or tease them out? I mean, the optimal way would be to take all of the soil off of it and tease them all out. You know, that would be the actual optimal way to make sure there were virtually no roots in that container wrapping over one another, you know, like this. But we don't live in that world. And a lot of trees you get that would be a really big, hard process. But I mean, honestly, the best way to do it would be to wash the soil off and have all the roots coming out. You'd have to do that on a very friendly planting day. You know, something in the 60s, maybe late in the day, early in the morning, no direct sun, you know, to wash the roots on something like that. I've never shown doing that because I don't. I don't do it. I typically will cut the roots and then I'll pull at them some. I know I'm leaving roots going in the ground that are going to cross over one another, and they're going to kill. Some root is going to be superior to another one in 10 years and cause problems. And I see that a lot on Japanese hollies, like compactas, Hellerise, a lot of the builders' landscapes, you know, where they put in, I call it 7 shrubs in a cloud of dust, where they put in, you know, they have to put in 7 shrubs because that's the town's, you know, that's what the town requires. 1 tree, sod the front, seed the back, 7 shrubs, 1 tree, we're out of here, you know, $1,800, man, we're going to do it 3 times today. But they'll always use the cheapest plant they can find, and a lot of times that's compacta hollies, which look like boxwoods, and they don't tease the roots on them. And I can see like 1 branch at the time on compacta hollies all over the place dying, and I think that's what that is. It's just that girdling, but it takes a few years for the roots to actually girdle and kill one another. So the optimal way would be really to be just go all out, but man, that's hard to do. It'd be much easier on a much smaller plant, like a 1-gallon, 3-gallon tree, you know, to really get after it that much. But in the meantime, I'm just going to cut the roots top to bottom and also tease them out. So I'm doing both. I'm cutting them and teasing them just to pull at them some. But the best answer would be the first one I said, which, you know, probably I'm not going to do. Somebody made a suggestion on a smaller celosia to grow next year for me. That's at the bottom. Again, on those comments, a lot of times somebody will make suggestions to me as well, and I get something out of it as well. And then somebody asked me about planting around a sinkhole. I don't know what kind of sinkhole we were talking about, but they said they had planted some forsythia around it and it was doing well. So I'm guessing if it's some sort of sloped piece, suckering shrubs are going to be your friend, and forsythia would fall into that group. Anybody who's ever grown forsythia will colonize. You know, any pruning you do on the top of it will have root suckers coming out. So any colonizing shrub, and that could be Itea or Virginia Sweetspire, Clethra, which has already been mentioned in this video, could be Calicarpa, beauty berries, but any colonizing shrub would be your friend on a sloped piece like that. If Forsythia is working, all of those things would work as well. Let's see. Somebody said, I said I shouldn't do a rant in every video, and then I had kind of a rant about misinformation on videos across the internet, and then there was a lot of funny comments related to that last week as well. But somebody said I should never get rid of my fertilizer rant about not over fertilizing, and I kind of agree with that. I have not. Just to put this in perspective, guys, if you're watching my weekly landscape update videos or any pruning video I'm doing or any video that I'm doing, I have not fertilized since late January out here. It was a super early fertilizing for me, and I did it early just because I wanted to talk about it early this year. Somebody got mad at me at the bottom of that video too because they thought I was going to lead people in the wrong way about fertilizing too early in the season. They were probably right, but that's it. That's the only fertilizers that's been put into this landscape. My containers have had no additional fertilizer this season. So just trying to get this out there that that compost and the wood chips and the hardwood mulch and the other things that have been added out here, and the soil that comes with the with the container, in the pots themselves, all of those things are helping to improve this soil. And I haven't fertilized. I'm going to fertilize probably my vegetables a bit going forward, but then I won't fertilize my fall vegetables going in because I will have already fertilized that space, and maybe a few of my containers in the next couple of weeks. But I actually talk about fertilizing more than I actually fertilize. I mean, I do very little fertilizing. Most everything that's happening here is happening based on soil improvement and not some synthetic fertilizer. And I never use synthetic fertilizers, period, but there's no secret thing that I'm hiding from you. Everything is about the soil being improved and the earthworms and the mycorrhizal fungi and the bacterial and fungi relationships that the plants have out here, and not interrupting any of that with chemicals or synthetic fertilizers. So, okay, let's see. Somebody then asked about pruning Clethra. So Clethra gets 3 shout outs in this video, and it should. It's a great native shrub for pollinators. Mine are just finishing flowering in the front garden. The best time to prune Clethra is in the late winter before it leaves out. It blooms on new growth, and new growth means, whatever growth it puts on next season, that's where the flowers are going to emerge from, as opposed to old growth, which would mean the flower buds would be setting on them pretty soon, and they would be on them all winter, and then they would bloom in the spring. So it blooms on new wood. Things that bloom on new wood, typically the best time to prune them is going to be in the late winter, right before they wake up. Mine in the front garden have gotten quite big, and I'm going to do a little bit of limited pruning on them in the next week or two, and then I'll do a more general pruning on them in February. Okay. Somebody asked about the species of Selaginella. I was talking about the Selaginella last week, or the arborvita fern, which is not an arborvita and not a fern. It's neither of those things. They wanted to know the species we were talking about, and it's Bronii, Selaginella Bronii. These are club mosses or spike mosses. Interesting group of plants. There's a lot of them, and they do look fern-like, and they're mostly part shade, moist condition plants. Great as fillers, but some of them can, they can take some space over time. Mine's gone from a little 1 gallon to about like 18 inches wide or so. I'll show it in next week's tour video. So if you haven't, you'll see it soon over there. But they're not so aggressive that they're not that hard to take out if you needed to, and you can dig a piece up and share it with somebody or put it in another shady space that you might have. Somebody asked me, first part of their question was, they don't see any crepe myrtles in this landscape. You never see any crepe myrtles in this landscape. The city of Raleigh has more crepe myrtles than it needs, with or without me. And Raleigh is the city of oaks, and it's becoming the city of crepe myrtles. Oaks, every time an oak falls or an oak gets taken down, 3 crepe myrtles go in its place. And most of them in this neighborhood are quite ugly. They're not attractive. That doesn't mean there are no attractive crepe myrtles in this neighborhood. There's some that have been given the amount of space that they need to become beautiful trees. Most of them, though, have been planted under electric lines, power lines, too close to the house, you name it, too much shade, and most are fairly unattractive. But the world has enough crepe myrtles without me participating in that, and that always gets lots of negative comments because, you know, folks from the Northeast especially really love crepe myrtles. They come down and see them in the summertime, and they, you know, I'm watching a hummingbird try to land on a lower petalum limb that's way too soft, and it just keeps going down. But yeah, folks that come down. So I got a fairly funny story from Disney many years back. I got on a boat in Disney, and it was just me and wife and Charlie, my son, who you guys have seen before, and we were the only 3 people on the boat in Disney. And the guy picks up the microphone. And he goes, "These trees on the right are called crepe myrtles." And I said, "Not another word about a plant. I'm on vacation. I don't want to talk about plants." I especially didn't want to talk about crepe myrtles. But I grew hundreds of thousands of them while I had my nursery business, and made a living basically on crepe myrtles this time of year. I understand the appeal and the draw of them. I do, but it's not for me. There's plenty of them without me. And this person has Japanese beetles on theirs. Wanted to know if they would have less Japanese beetles if they took out the crepe myrtle. No, the Japanese beetle larvae are mostly in your lawn. They're going to find something else they like in your landscape, in all likelihood. They definitely, crepe myrtles are very high on their list. So are roses. You guys who have Japanese beetles, you know, there is definitely a pecking order of things they like. Native hibiscus. Oh my gosh, the dinner plate hibiscus, they just tear them up. But there's a lot of things so yes, removing some of the things that are the worst for them, you know, probably will reduce some impact in your landscape, but you're not going to eliminate them. And they'll eat things that they probably don't like if they have no other options. So, but really, this comes down to having lawn in the full sun. You know, that's typically where those larvae are. But anyway, no, you don't have to cut down your crepe myrtle, and you have my crepe myrtle. So there you go. Let's see. Somebody has some redbud seedlings, and so they germinated some redbud seed on one that was somebody from their families, a father's or something like that. So I thought that was great. Redbuds are not that easy to germinate from, not the easiest thing in the world to germinate from seed, although they come up all over your landscape like crazy. But when you're doing it yourself, sometimes they don't cooperate all that well. They wanted to know when they should plant them in the ground. You can probably, if you've got, you know, depends on how tall they are. If they were more than about 6 inches or so, I might go ahead and put them in the ground for the winter. Otherwise, just leave them above the ground, put them tight together, be prepared to put them in a garage if the pots are going to freeze solid. You don't have to keep them warm, just don't let them, you know, stay frozen solid for 24 hours. For me, most of the time, I'm going to overwinter things in containers and just offer them protection, you know, through packing tight together, putting a cover over them. Worst case scenario, putting them in a garage, like I say, or on a porch like I'm on right now, just someplace where they won't stay frozen. But overall, redbuds are very cold hardy and probably would tolerate just going into the ground. I'm sure that was confusing, whatever I just said. Either, but for me, I would probably leave them in a container. Okay, let's see. Somebody is going to be transplanting a lot of shrubs in September, October. I guess they're moving houses, and one of them was a large camellia that they're in the process of moving. I have a video on my channel for moving a camellia, and a video that's attached to it, which is how to prep plants to be moved. So those 2 videos are 2 that I would recommend that you watch. I would go and prep those plants to be moved now, which is just a matter of going around them with a shovel and going ahead and cutting some of the roots coming out from them. Maybe do a little bit of tip pruning on a lot of the really new growth that's on the top of it. So if you've got you know, 6 inches of new growth on the top of your camellia right now, which you might, you can just go through and take an inch off the end of each of those branches, and that will stop it from needing as much water, and then go ahead and cut the roots on it and prepare it to be moved. That's how I move large shrubs. I go and I do a root pruning and a pruning of the top, and then I wait a couple months and then I move them. So that timing works about right for you, maybe. Last question for this week. I don't know how many this was. It was 20 maybe. Somebody has a blushing bride hydrangea which has never bloomed. That's a hydrangea macrophylla. I don't know. On a lot of these questions, I don't know the zone that you're living in, but blushing bride is a macrophylla, big leaf hydrangea. It's a white flowering one. It's a great plant, really vivid white hydrangea macrophylla. If it's never bloomed, if you were in zone 5, that would be the reason it's probably never bloomed, because it's just getting too cold in the winter and the buds are being damaged. I don't know, are you pruning it in the wintertime? They said they had other hydrangea macs that are blooming, so I'm guessing that they know better than to prune them in the winter, so that kind of answered that. But again, I don't know if it could be winter issue. I've talked many times on this channel. If I had a hydrangea that didn't bloom for 6 years, I would have removed it after the 4th year. So that's probably what I would do with it. Is not to have to go and continue to worry about it, forever and ever. I probably would replace it. And again, if you're in zone 5, it may be that the buds are being killed by the winter. If you were in zone 9, potentially, it's not getting quite enough cool on it to get it dormant enough. But if your other ones are blooming well, that's probably not it either. So, but again, I'm guessing that the buds are being damaged on it during the wintertime. Even here in zone 7, we can have our hydrangea macrophyllas. The buds can be damaged on them. That blushing bride may be waking up a week or 2 sooner before another one. This could be another issue, that just pops to my mind. Is, let's say, a scenario where your other hydrangea macrophyllas are in a more open space, and so they're staying dormant a little bit longer because they're a little more exposed to the cold, and this one is waking up a hair earlier. It would make it more susceptible to a late frost. So rather than the low temperature of the winter having killed it, it could be just a mild frost or a light freeze at the wrong time of year on one that's racing ahead of the others. That could be it as well. But again, you might try to transplant it first. Just to rule what I just set out, and give that a season. And if that doesn't work, rip it up by the roots, and you have an opportunity for a new plant. So thank you guys for watching and following along. Send your photos in to HortTube at Gmail for the Subscriber Sunday video. Again, turn your phone sideways and take a great picture in the morning light or the evening light, and I look forward to seeing them. Thanks for watching.